Hi, my name is Tori, and today I would like to talk about an amazing book I just read, The Innovators, How a Group of Hackers, Geniuses, and Geeks Created the Digital Revolution. This book was written by Walter Isaacson, and it is a series of biographies about all of the people who have contributed to the process of making computers, from the 1800s to the early 2000s. This is really interesting. Walter Isaacson has written a lot of different biographies about specific people, but this one is about a variety of different people, and I really like that. Now, he does go into the personal lives of these people a little bit, but mostly it is just about their accomplishments and the things they did to help create computers. Along the way, you end up learning a lot of really fascinating things about how computers work. I am actually majoring in computer science, and I'm about finished with the sophomore level. So it was really interesting for me to see a little bit of the things I had studied before. You would absolutely not need to know anything about computers going into this, but if you do, it's just fun to see where things came from and see what you already know and what interesting new little facts you're going to learn. I really liked the writing style of this book. It was very easy to understand. It sounded very much like a person talking to you and telling you all about these different people. It wasn't too dense, and you still got a lot of information. You learned a lot about how computers work, but it wasn't anything that was over your head or that you need to have any technical background to understand. It was a very simple writing style that made the book very engaging and interesting, and it really made you feel like you were living in the culture of the places where these people lived, and you could see where they were, where they grew up, and what led them to come up with these brilliant inventions that help facilitate the world we have today. I actually listened to this as an audiobook, and I really enjoyed that format. It was really great to just sit back and hear it, and you didn't need to see a lot of diagrams or anything like that to understand what they were talking about. I did, however, pick up a physical copy, just a used, fairly cheap version, because I wanted to be able to look up the different names of people, and it also has a lot of really interesting photographs. If you look through it, there are just different photos of the people they talk about. And you absolutely would not have to get a physical version of this book if you didn't want to. It was just really nice for me to get to have the physical version to look at too. This book covers a really wide range of different material. It starts in the 1800s with Ada Lovelace, however you say that, and it pretty quickly jumps into about the 1930s and starts with a lot of computer development there. So it skips about 100 years in between those two events, and then it goes very systematically through the 1930s to today, talking about all the different things that we've developed and all the different ways computers have changed. One of the main points that Walter Isaacson makes in this book is that some people argue that different innovations and leaps in technology come from specific people coming up with brilliant ideas, and some argue that it comes from a group of people in the right place at the right time working together to make these things. And the author argues that it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of one single person being brilliant, but that brilliant person has to be surrounded by many other people who have contributed a lot, and that person has to live in a time when their innovations are possible. Some of my favorite parts of this book were actually the parts that took place farther back in history. I loved hearing about Ada Lovelace and all the things that she came up with back in the 1800s. It was also very interesting to hear about Alan Turing, and it touched on his life and the tragic story of that a little bit, but mostly it talked about his amazing inventions and his amazing thought experiments that helped us understand how computers work today. It was also interesting to hear some names of the modern companies that are really popular right now. We learned about the founders of Gateway and Apple and how that came to be and all the things they did to make their companies thrive and give us the world that we have today. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a great read. I loved listening to it in the audio format. And I think it's a really great introduction for anyone who's interested about learning some things about computers and how computers work, but doesn't really have a background in it. And if you do have a background, you would also love to hear about the people who created all the things that you know how to use. So I would definitely recommend this book. It was an excellent read. I learned a lot, and I was very entertained.